Welcome back to the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge Podcast with myself, Alex, and Crystal, my co-host.
Hey guys.
And this is the Training Fundamentals series. Today we're talking about rest periods. Once again, if you have not watched the prior episodes, go back and do so because these are meant to be watched or listened to in order. Okay, so we've talked about just in training, adherence, volume, frequency, and intensity. Then we've tackled progression and exercise selection. And now we are up to rest period. So we're going to go through the key points. And then as ever, we're going to make some recommendations and considerations. So first off the bat, stimulus to fatigue ratios. What does that mean? Well, it means the amount of stimulus versus the amount of fatigue that you get. Stimulus meaning the adaptation, the stimulus that causes the adaptation desirable, in this case, building muscle tissue or creating that demand, that damage that is going to create bigger and stronger muscles, versus the fatigue that we get through a maybe nervous system fatigue, i.e. the recoverable amount of volume that we're going to be doing. So when we have, say, for example, an exercise that is a very high skill in nature. So let's take a high bar barbell squat, okay? This is a very, very complex movement and it requires a lot of concentration and a lot of effort. There's a lot of stability. For example, if we partner that or we put that up against a leg press, it's not as technical, the movement, and it's a lot easier in terms of you can get in, you lock yourself in, and you can push. There's not too much to think about. Where with that high bar squat, you need to think about unracking the bar, the foot position, the bar position. You have to keep that bar in position the whole time. There's a lot of other muscle groups that are working vicariously. It is a lower body movement. It's quad dominant, but, you're using everything. It's full body. You're using your abdominals. You're using your upper back to keep the packing. It's very taxing as well on the anaerobic energy system versus a leg press. So if you were to put those together, you might go, well, initially the high bar derives a higher return on investment, but as one would get very strong, 200 kilos on a high bar squat versus 200 kilos on a leg press, well, that derives a different level of fatigue. Now, with the high bar squat requires a lot more skill, and it requires a lot more recovery. So therefore, you cannot do as much volume. Therefore, you could not hit that muscle group again or even that movement again because it's more complex in nature. It creates more fatigue. Where with the leg press, you get the stimulus and possibly more because you're more specific to that muscle group and you're going to be able to recover faster, although it will still hurt and you will still be fatigued, but you could probably hit that muscle again in the next couple of days or even, that same exercise if that was your desire with different rep ranges. So that's what we're talking about. If we have movement patterns that create too much fatigue and not enough stimulus, then it's not an intelligent way to train. We're really just creating more fatigue and we have to recover, but without getting the return on investment. It's kind of like putting $1 in and getting $3 out or putting $1 in and getting, say, $8 out. And that is what we have to consider through different parts of the journey. Did you want to add on to anything?
The only thing that I'll add on to that is, so if you are doing, so another way that we can utilize this, right, is if you're going into a training session, if you're not feeling 100%, if you're like, I'm about 8 out of 10, I'm pretty tired, not feeling that great, didn't sleep well. So we kind of regulate even our program we can do by swapping out, let's just say if we were doing the barbell squat and then going, not sure how I feel today with this one, even you'll be able to swap it out for like a leg press or even like a hack squat, things like that is a little bit lower fatiguing, but still going to get that bit of stimulus as well.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah. Like what we talked about last time with that auto regulation, knowing
Absolutely.
when to change it. And I know we've probably been stubborn in the past where you go in, you go, well, that's what I'm doing. And then you do it.
And then you
don't
hurt
perform
yourself
so well, and then, like you said, you get an injury, and then you're sort of left with a lot less.
Yeah, 100%.
That just prolongs it. So
exactly.
If you can load a muscle, you can grow a muscle, and even if it's not exactly what you're meant to do, and ideally that's you want to be consistent, but sometimes you just got to know when to go. Not today.
Yeah, 100%.
And having that back. So metabolic damage is the next thing I've got on here. So when we're thinking about metabolic damage, we want to think about, again, it's that we want to create enough to cause adaptation, but not too much to the point where
we're fatigued.
we can't recover from it or we can't do the rest of the workout. So, for example, if you go balls to the wall on your high bar squat and you do, say, 5 sets, we do some German volume training, 10 sets of 10 back in the day. Silly.
Yeah.
Got some gain from it, though. you're probably not going to have the rest of your session is probably not going to be great. And then you might be hanging around for, say, 2 hours like I used to do in the gym, and you're doing that. And then you're getting into your hypertrophy stuff afterwards. And before you know it, it just becomes very unrealistic or unsustainable unless you've got hours in the gym. And even then, you could get more from less. So we have to control these elements. We have to look at that fatigue. So when we're talking about rest periods now specifically, we've got short versus long. And generally, the longer rest periods are going to be partnered with the exercises that create more fatigue, right? Of course, if we're doing that squat, again, that high bar squat, we're going to have more rest than we are if we are doing that conversely with a leg extension, okay? So we have something where we would say it's a high stimulus, but it's also a high recovery and high risk. And then we have things that are lower stimulus and a higher recovery, right? And maybe the stimulus is not so great, but it's still there, and we're doing it in a fatigue state. So we have to think about this all the time. So when we're having these longer rest periods, we want to rest until the point where we feel like we're ready to go again. We want to look for a couple of things. We want to look for that heart rate to drop in elevation, which it will in certain movement patterns. And we want to feel like, okay, I'm ready to do this. But sometimes the body lies, especially in the early days. We have a generalization where some people will jump in after 20 seconds and they're like perpetually trying to train, and they do concurrent training, and that robs you of your performance, your volume, your strength. But also, if we hang around for 5 to 10 minutes, we might find not only we are prolonging the workout, but we start to cool down. And that's not great for the exercise preparation either, or even that sort of ability to maintain performance. So we want to think about making sure that if we need to, we have a stopwatch or something like that. And generally, between 90 seconds and 2 minutes for a compound would be about right. We're at the shorter end. And like, look, if we're thinking powerlifting, we may get up to that sort of cheeky 3 to 5. But, you know, we all know that sometimes we are a bit too luxurious with that. But most of us are here for physique sports. So around that is going to be where we're at. But look, if you need a bit more, you take it, especially towards the end of a block or where you're really pushing, or a day that you got to listen to your body. For isolation exercises, you're going to be anywhere from 60 seconds to 90 seconds. You can generally recover a lot faster. You'll find that, you know, you do a squat, we've all been there, you do a big compound, you're panting, you're breathing, you're heaving, you're sat on the floor, maybe you've even fallen over because it was so fatiguing after doing lunges. Oh, we all love a good lunge, don't we? And
definitely sit on the floor after those.
Just destroys you. Yeah, you need like a wheelchair. And then, you know, you're like, well, I'm resting now. There's no way I could even get up. But, you know, you jump off a leg extension and, you know, you feel it, the burn is real, that lactic threshold, that waste product's there, and you're like, oh my God, you can't move, you jump off, you know, you have a little fit, but like 30 seconds, you're like, oh, I'm actually okay, even though you take a little bit longer, but with the lunge, you're still on the floor, like not even contemplating wanting to get back up. So there's good insignias in the body, but again, you can recover from obviously in isolation because there's less total fatigue there. That is, or if you think it's more like local fatigue in an isolation exercise where, it's, I'm forgetting the actual word, but it's more overall fatigue in a big compound movement because, again, it's compound in nature. There's more things going on. Specifically, intensifiers, I've got this here in brackets, meaning that, for example, if you're doing something like a superset, you might negate the rest period between the superset. So if we think about two opposing muscle groups, we call them agonist, antagonist, right? So let's say, for example, we've got bicep and tricep, right? While one is flexed, the other is generally relaxed. Same with quads and hamstrings. We might do something for a time-saving method or, again, to intensify, to create a higher level of fatigue or stimulus, do a leg extension and then do a leg curl, and then we may rest. And that's when we have maybe that 60, maybe 90, maybe we have that 2 minutes because we are, you know, having that that superset. But it's a really good way to train muscle groups in an efficient manner as well. We've got things like myo reps matches as well. We've got things like fatigue accumulation methods and whatnot. And I think we'll do a separate episode on intensifiers because there's a little bit to dig in there for the advanced folks. But they are my notes. What would you like to add? And there's probably things here that we could go on tangents on, but I'm trying to keep this more mainstream.
Definitely go on tangents. We can.
Lots of chat.
Yeah, it's you. So definitely what Alex has just said and pointed out. So within regards to your more complex movements, what the things that are more fatiguing on the body, you want to be generally going to, you know, that 90 to even 2 minute kind of rest break. If you are doing, you know, if you're literally training with a mate and it's about 5 minutes before you go back in, generally you are taking the piss, let's say. is
True.
what it is.
True.
The body has
The body's
definitely calmed down. The heart rate's gone back to normal long before then. And that is also where you can also cause a little bit of damage as well, because the muscles will start to cool down. Yeah, exactly. And, you're just going to push your own progress back as well. So just keeping to your times in regards to that. With the supersets, as Alex said as well, so do your back-to-back sets. After you've done that set, then take the rest. That's how I would use those ones. But those are the biggest things really in regards to your rest periods. And your isolation movements is, 60 to 90 seconds. That's all you need.
Because it could be an argument made that, if you're constantly elongating your workout to try and accumulate volume, you're not actually progressing. If you were, say, really taking the piss, like I usually do it in 60 minutes, and then 60 becomes an hour and a half and 2 hours, you're actually lifting more, but it's taking you double the time. So are you actually getting stronger to a degree, right? Because if we squatted for 24 hours, we could probably accumulate a lot more volume, but that's not the goal.
But then you're also accumulating a lot more fatigue as well in the body. Yeah, fatigue is a funny one because it is finding that good balance. There is a definite balance between getting the most out of an exercise to then pushing too hard where your body is not recovering, and then you'd have to pull back. So a lot of people do the whole, train to failure. There's a lot of good and bad to it. A lot of people either love it or hate it. So the biggest thing with it though is that if you're constantly training to failure, you cannot progress past. It will get to a point where you can't really push yourself even further because you're constantly fatigued, because really, especially with the compound movements, we can't expect our body to just miraculously recover within 24 to 48 hours before we go into our next set if you are actually training to pure failure. So there's mechanical failure, there's
failure.
Yeah, exactly. So, with ours, check obviously programming, but it's usually anything between, especially for hypertrophy, anything between 2 to 4 reps in reserve is for hypertrophy. So that is going to be efficient enough for building muscle.
Absolutely. And I think we probably need to dive into that on tempo as well, which is more just your proximity to failure.
Yes.
Which is true. So
because a lot of people are also not training into even, 2 reps in reserve, or they're not even training really to those parameters. When you're training, think about not training to failure, but training towards failure. So even just flipping that kind of switch on, this is actually what we're meant to be trying to do here. But a lot of people actually don't train anywhere near to failure or even in those parameters in what they think they're doing.
It's true. And I don't think they can, because the prerequisite to training close or even to failure is a mental capacity to go through that much pain, but also the skill that is required to do that, because the skill acquisition, the execution, the tempo, the range is the thing that actually allows you to get to that point, because you can fail by swinging weights, but you probably didn't fail actually, you just kind of failed with not being able to swing and use momentum anymore. That is very different to actually failing through mechanical tension specifically. That it's a very sadistic
it is
sort of event, if you will, to say the least, if you see someone trained or true failure. But again, you get no extra benefit from it, so getting close to it is enough,
100%
based on what we know. So recaps then, stimulus to fatigue ratios, making sure we're allocating volume and choosing exercises which are appropriate to where we are. So we're accumulating more stimulus rather than fatigue, or managing it. Again, similar with metabolic damage, thinking about, okay, that's just a fancy name really for, the damage we are creating in the body to create adaptation. And if we cause too much, then we can't recover from it. So we've got that minimum recoverable volume, then really we're doing ourselves a disservice. Every time we go in the gym, remember, we're not creating muscle, we're destroying it, we're damaging it, we're creating a demand to grow more, but then we need to supply the nutrition and the rest and recovery. We talked about rest periods, short and long, just some basics of that, and intensifiers. And we've talked about also RPE at the end there a little bit, or even just proximity to failure. Now, again, we could deep dive in a lot of these things, but this is designed to cover the main elements so you get some basic takeaways and recommendations, as well as creating awareness. And obviously, we might do these deep dives in the future, but also within our coaching. So we go into great detail with this as and when needed. Before we wrap up, anything else that you want to mention on this one?
No, we're good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so as ever, guys, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, or other, please do follow along for more. Give it a share. And on YouTube, please drop a like and share it around. Subscribe for more. And of course, we'll see you on that next episode.